Alright, hi everyone, welcome back to Digital Dreambox. Today we have a subscriber request and it's how to make land that's connected to water. And I thought we'd make a low poly river surrounded by a little bit of terrain. So let's jump right in and check it out. Alright, let's start. Go up to your poly modeling shelf and add a plane into the scene. We're going to use this to make our river channel as well as a bit of that terrain. First, let's scale this up. So open up your channel box and we will scale it 24 by 24 in the X and the Z axis. There we go. And then what we're going to do is, right now the plane is fairly flat. We're going to break up this surface and make it look a little more like ground by adding one of the deformers. But first, let's turn on our polycount display. So go to the display tab, heads up display, and choose, check the box beside polycount. There we go. And then right now we have this for the topology. Let's give it some more divisions. Open up the modeling toolkit and then click the add divisions button a few times. I'm gonna stop at around 200,000 triangles, but you can definitely go more or less if you like. Just be careful, if you go too high, it'll slow down Maya, might even crash it. But I find 200,000 is a good amount that will allow us to capture the details on it. All right, let's select the mesh again, open up our channel box. We have a bit of history here and we can freeze these transformations. So let's click this icon to delete the history and this one to freeze the transformations. All right, so now let's give this a deformer. I'm gonna select the plane, so make sure it's selected, go to the deform tab, and then down here, we're giving it the texture deformer. So click on that one. And then open up your attribute editor. We're gonna load in a texture. Right here, where that checkerboard is, click on that. That'll allow us to create a render node. And we're adding this noise texture that comes with Maya. So click on this one here. Right away, you should see something, right? The plane has a bit of height now, some deformation. And what's happening is that I'm just gonna lower this amplitude so you can see a bit better. It's using this texture to drive the height of the plane where we added all that topology. So I've actually just selected the plane accidentally, but I wanna show you something as well. If we select the plane, we can get back to that noise texture by mouse wheeling down here. However, now our mesh is selected, so we're seeing the selection outline, which makes it a little bit hard to see our changes. So what I like to do is I'll open up the outliner, go down here, and I'll choose the texture deformer handle, and then I'll find the texture deformer from here and click on this arrow, and this arrow will bring us back to that noise texture that we added on. All right, so now let's play with some of these settings. I've already played around with some of these settings and I know what to set mine to, but you may want to just experiment and see what you get. Also, this default texture that came with it, I'm actually going to change it to Perlin noise. It's gonna give me more the look I want for mine. And then just play around with these parameters. You can copy mine if you choose to, or you can just experiment and see what else you can create here. But for the amplitude, I'm going for around 0.2, maybe a bit less. For the ratio, around 0.4. Depth max, I'm gonna take up to 6. That'll give us a bit more detail. And then for the frequency, maybe I'll bring that up just a little, maybe around to 9. All right, so this is what I have for my ground. That's good enough for me. And then what we want to do now is delete that history. So I tend to delete the history a lot because if you build up history, Maya starts slowing down. So right now, it's not too bad. I probably don't really need to do it yet, but I'm going to do it anyhow. So I'm going to select the mesh and just delete history. All right. And then what we want to do now is maybe create a little bit of elevation in some of these areas on the mesh to make it look a little more interesting and not so flat. And we can go about it a couple different ways. We can maybe use one of the sculpting tools such as like the grab brush. And I have a tutorial on how to create like a mountainous landscape. If you want to check that out, I'll post maybe a link at the end. But what I'm going to do is something a little bit different. I'm just going to use the Lattice deformer. So select the mesh. And so we're going to go back up to the deform tab And then down here, we're going to choose Lattice. And then you can change the divisions from here, but I'm actually going to open up the attribute editor because I have to change something else here as well. Over here, there's something called lattice shape. Select that one. And then for the divisions, I'm going to lower the T divisions from 5 down to 2. So we don't need all those horizontal divisions. And then we want to give it some divisions going crosswise. So I'm going to make it about 6. So 6 for the S divisions and 6 for the U divisions. And how the lattice works is if we hold down the right mouse button, choose lattice points, we can grab some of these points and move them. But what you'll notice is sometimes it doesn't create the fall off that we want, because the way the lattice works is when you move these points, rotate or scale them, it deforms it proportionally. And right now it hasn't really done much. So I'm going to undo this. What we're going to do instead is right here on this input, click FFD1. And I'm going to turn off local. And now if I move this, you can see we have a bit more fall off that goes across the mesh. So I'm going to undo that. And what I'm going to do is start lifting up some of these sections. I'm not going to move it in the X or Z axis because I want to preserve this square form for the look I'm going for, because I'll make it look a little bit like a diorama for later by extruding it down into like a sort of like a cube shape. So I'm going to box select some of these lattice points. And then if you are selecting these, just be careful because there's points on the bottom. And if you're unsure, just turn on X-ray mode so you can see that when you're selecting it. But I'm just going to eyeball it, start moving some of these around and changing the look of this just a little bit. So maybe my river will start over here and I'll snake around to this side. And maybe I'll bring up maybe some of these and bring up this one a little bit. So you can see now it looks much more natural, right? Not so flat. I think that's pretty good. I'll probably leave it at the way it is. Maybe I'll bring up this section a little higher. There we go. I think that's pretty good like that. And now what we want to do is select the mesh, and to get rid of the lattice, we'll just delete that history. All right. Now the next thing we want to do is maybe deform it a little more. What I like to do is I'll select the mesh. Now maybe use the soft modification tool, and that's down here. And how this one works is you click on part of the mesh, and if you hold down B and the left mouse button and click and drag, you can increase or decrease that fall off. And if we go into some of these sections, maybe click on a section, we can just make it look a little more random. So I'm going to add a few just hill areas here. There we go. You can also rotate and scale that as well, but I'm just going to lift it up a little bit. And I think that's probably good. Maybe a little bit here. And there we go. So now you can see it's a little more random. Awesome. And then again, we'll just delete that history. So if we select this, actually, there's not much history, so we're okay. All right, next let's create our river channel. So if I select this mesh now and I go into vertex mode, to get into vertex mode, I'm gonna hold down the right mouse button, and this opens up the component modes. I'm gonna choose vertex. If I select a few of these vertices, or even just one, right, we can move it. But what I'm gonna do is press B on the keyboard. B is going to enable soft select, and if, just like the soft modification tool, if we hold down B, left click and drag, we can increase or decrease that fall off, right? And so what we want to do is just select a section that we will push down and create that river channel. And to do that, I'm just going to click off here, so we unselect. We're going to use the paint selection tool over here on the left. So click on this icon. And now what I'm going to do is first create the brush size I want. Again, just hold down B, left click and drag to increase or decrease that. And I'm going to go with maybe like 0.3 or 0.4. So something pretty small. And then we're going to start over here or wherever you like. But I'm going to probably have my river come this way, maybe snake around this way a little bit, and then come out here. Something like that. All right. And you can see now we have this. And if we go into our move tool, pressing W to go to my move tool, we can push that down a little bit. and we can start creating this river channel. What I'm going to do is not push it down too far just yet. I'm going to push it down a little bit, and then I'm going to grow the selection. And the reason I'm doing that is I don't want to push it down so much that it feels like this river is really steep. I want to create something a little more gradual. So I'm going to bring this back up to about here. And then we're going to grab our greater than sign key, which will grow the selection. So to get to that, hold down Shift and press period. There we go. And I'll bring it up a couple steps, push it down a little bit more. And then I'm going to grow it again. And then push it down a little bit more. So we have something like this. And this is what I'll have for my river channel. All right, when you're done, press Q to go to your select tool, and then press B to exit soft selection, because that can slow down some of the processes if we leave that on. And then let's go into object mode. So now we have this, right? And didn't take us much time and looks pretty good. And if you were making something more realistic, this is a great technique as well, but we want something low poly. So let's change this to give it a low poly look. So I'm going to select the mesh. And then what we'll do is we'll remesh this. So a little bit different from the method we did in the other tutorials, right? This time we're going to click remesh. And we'll give it a second. It's going to remesh this into triangles. And what we want to do is just play with this max edge length. So I'm going to first make it 1, right? And just see what we get. And just like that, you can see that we have something that feels low poly now, right? We probably want to bring this down a little more, but you'll just create the look you want for yours. But I'm going to lower mine a little more. Some low poly art is very low and some is a little bit higher. For terrain, I like to go a little bit higher than normal, right? So I'm going to increase this. Sorry, when I say higher, I mean like a little more topology than normal. So I'm going to increase this to 2 and see what we get. And I think 2 is pretty good as well, but I'll probably go with maybe 1.7. Right. There we go. And I think that looks pretty good. So now we have some terrain and a river channel. And this technique you can use not just to make river channels, but trenches or the river basin or even lakes as well. So very versatile. But yeah, this is what we have. All right, now let's create the water for our terrain that we made. First, let's select this object, press H on the keyboard to hide it. And then we're going to add a new plane into the scene. And let's change the dimensions of this. So we need this terrain to cover that water channel, so the river channel. And we're going to press T on the keyboard. We're going to change the width. So let's make the width about 3. There we go. And then change the height as well. So for the height, I want it to go a little bit past this grid. So I'm going to make this about 35, should be fine. And then for the divisions, I'm going to change the division height. I'm going to make this about 400. We need quite a bit of topology to capture that water detail. And then for the division width, I'm just going to maybe bring this up to like 40. There we go. And then now I can hide the grid again. And let's do the same thing we did with the terrain. We'll give it a texture deformer. So select it, go to the Deform tab. Down here, choose Texture Deformer again. We'll open up the attribute editor. And then we want to add a new node. And what we're looking for this time is the ocean shader. There we go. And with the ocean shader, the first thing we want to do is give it a bit of height so we can see what's happening. So down here for the wave height, I'm going to change this value to about maybe 8. 8's going to give us a nice wave detail. And then what we'll do is we'll give it a little bit of turbulence. So I'll leave that at 1 for now. We may change it later. For the wave peaking, actually, let me change this so you can see what's happening. I'm going to change this to 2. And you can see we can get a much more chaotic wave. But I'll bring it back down to 1. And then for the peaking, I'm going to bring this up to about 4 for now. And we may change this later as well. So let's change the scale so this looks a little more like waves. So for the scale factor, I'm going to bring this up somewhere between probably 40 and 50. So I'll leave that, 40-ish for now. And then you can see right away, it's starting to look like water. And now I can see that I want a bit more wave height. So I'm going to bring this up to maybe 10. and maybe even a bit more, maybe 12. There we go. So that is what I'm gonna go with for that. And then for the num frequencies, if we drag this down to 0, you can see we lose all that detail. So we just wanna drag this up and stop where we're happy. And I'm gonna go with probably, somewhere here is fine. And then I'll play with maybe like a couple more values, maybe the wavelength, right? So go with maybe something like that. And you can see now we have a pretty nice looking water form. When you're done and you're happy with the parameters you set, just select your mesh and we'll delete that history. All right, so now let's bring back the grid for a second. I'm gonna move this off to the side somewhere. So down here. And we wanna make sure we don't freeze those transforms because we wanna make sure that's in the center. It affects how we curve warp. So what we're going to do is, let's bring back our terrain. So select it, press H on the keyboard to unhide it. And we might as well name it as well. I'm gonna call this terrain. And I'll call this one water. There we go. And then for the terrain, to make it a little bit easier to see, I'm gonna change the color of this. So I'm gonna hold that, first select it, hold down the right mouse button, and choose Assign New Material. And for the new material, I'm just gonna give it a Lambert, and I'm gonna make it green. You can make it whatever color you like. You can make it a little bit grassy. And something like that should work. That way we can see the water a little bit easier on this terrain. All right, so now we need to have this piece of water warp around here, right? So snake around our terrain in this channel that we made. And to do that, we're going to use one of the curve tools to help us do it. So what we'll do is we'll go up to the Create tab, go to Curve Tools and choose CV Curve Tool. And how the curve tool works is, let me just first go into the top view. So I'm gonna tap the spacebar and hover over the top view, tap the spacebar again. And how the curve tool works is, if I turn off the grid, we just need to click on this viewport and it'll start laying down some curve points. I'm just gonna press escape to get rid of that. So over here, we want to have a curve following this channel. So click on the viewport and start drawing out. If you can't see your curve, you can turn on X-ray mode. That'll make it a little bit easier to see. And I'm going to keep clicking and plotting some points and exit on this side. Once you're done, press enter. And now we have a curve following that channel. Awesome. Let's tap the spacebar to go to our 4-panel view, and we'll go back to this view as well. And then what we want to do now is select our mesh, hold down Shift, select the curve. And if you have trouble selecting it, you can also select it from the outliner as well. And then now all we need to do is go to the Deform tab and choose Curve Warp. And you can see that it's warped along the curve. However, it's rotated in the wrong direction. So we need to go over here to the Curve Warp 1 tab. And then down here, there's a curve rotation option. And we're just going to play with this a little bit. And I'm going to go -90 for mine. And you can see now it's following there. And if we want, we could even turn off this and it would go the length of the curve. The length of the curve. However, let me just take a look. If I check that back on, do I have enough? Yeah, I have enough space, so I don't even need to check that. But if yours doesn't follow all the way through, you might want to uncheck that. All right, so now we have this. And if we go into our curve tool, select the curve and then hold down the right mouse button and choose Control Vertex, we can move some of these points and have it like sit in that channel. However, what you'll notice is that actually it's working pretty well for mine. Sometimes when you grab this, the curve starts rotating funny, right? And so you may want to use the soft modification tool, right? To move the curve up and down to follow that channel. But for me, it's working, right? So what I'm going to do, might be because I've selected on this end. Let me just try it. Yeah, so if you select it on this end, you can see that the curve starts rotating. So you want to make sure that you're choosing the points starting from the other side. I'm just going to undo this. And then what we'll do is we'll start selecting some of these points and have it sit nicely in this water channel. All right, and then when we're done, we can select our mesh, delete that history, and then we can get rid of the curve. And then I want to do a few more things to this before we wrap up. First, I want to select this mesh, go into edge mode, and then I'm going to double click this outside edge so that we have that perimeter, and I'm going to go into my scale tool, hold down shift on the keyboard, and do a smart extrude down. There we go. And I think we will scale the bottom as well. So I'm going to go into the scale tool and just scale that flat. And I'm not going to fill in the bottom because that won't be seen. But now we have a nice looking diorama scene. And then with the curve, sorry, not the curve, the water, I'm going to do the same thing. But first we want to make this look low poly. And right now it has a nice looking form to it. So I want to keep that edge flow a little bit. So we're going to make this look low poly a little bit different. We're going to retopologize it first. So select the mesh, and then we're going to go to the mesh tab down here, open up that option box, just going to reset this. And I'm going to choose about 20,000 for the face count. That way we can keep a lot of that detail and then click retopologize. This may take a few seconds or a couple minutes to finish depending on your computer. And so I'll see you when this is done. All right, it just finished. It took just under a minute for me. I'm just going to minimize this output window. And now we have this. And you can see that the topology, if I were to turn this on, the wireframe, you can see it's following this. So we'll get an interesting triangle flow this time for this object. And so now all we need to do is select this mesh, and we are going to first delete that history. Just going to open this up, right? Delete the history. We're going to go to the mesh tab, triangulate, and then we want to reduce this. So let's delete the history, mesh, reduce. And there we go. And for now, I'm just going to input a hard number here just to remove a lot of that triangle count. Because if we try and drag this percentage slider right now, it's going to lag a little bit probably because we still have a lot of topology there. So I'm going to bring this up to maybe 80. Click enter, and you can see that's reduced it by quite a bit. Let's select it. We'll go to the mesh display and harden these edges to give it a nice low poly look. And we want to maybe give this a color as well so we can see that how it looks. So hold down the right mouse button, choose assign new material. Gonna give it another Lambert. Maybe I'll make this one bluish, something like that for now. And then maybe even a bit brighter. There we go. And for this one, maybe I'll make this one, oops, starting to lag. Maybe I have a bit of history on this one probably. Yeah, I'm gonna delete the history on this one as well. And then hold down the right mouse button. We can go back to its material attributes this way. Just gonna make this a bit brighter. There we go. And then for the water, let's select this and, oh, that's probably too bright actually. There we go. And then for the water, what we want to do is maybe reduce this a bit further to make it a little more low poly. So I'm going to select it, go to the mesh tab again, and I'm going to hit it with another reduce. And I do that so that now we can drag this percentage slider and it won't lag too much. If you find it's lagging and you know you need to reduce a bit more, we can just select the mesh, delete that history again, and hit it with another reduce. There we go. And now let's take a look at it. And I like that, but I want to bring back a bit more of that topology. So I'm going to select it and lower this percentage slider because it reduces 50% at a time. So I'm going to go with probably, for my water, maybe something like this, right? Where we can see those waves coming through. So it feels like there's a bit more realism there, and a bit more impressionistic. And then if you find any areas where your water is sitting too high, you can go in here and maybe grab your soft modification tool and bring down the water or bring up the terrain. So go in here and over here, maybe I want this terrain to be a bit higher. So I can go in here, maybe increase that fall off a little bit and just lift it up, right? So it's up to you, right? But you can still adjust it that way. And yeah, so now we have this. And then one more thing I'd like to do with this water is I like it to sit in the terrain a little bit. So let's slice it over here. So select the mesh. We'll go into the top view. There we go. And then we'll grab our multi-cut tool and then we'll zoom in a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is click on this area over here, so a little bit sitting inside the mesh. Hold down Shift on the keyboard, move this over here, let go, and it's going to add a cut right there. It's a little bit hard to see, but we'll turn on wireframe unshaded so we can see. There we go. And we'll do the same over here. So again, select the mesh, grab your multi-cut tool, click down, hold down Shift on the keyboard, and then move it over here, let go. It's going to add a straight cut. And now what we'll do is we'll press Q to go to our select tool. We'll go into edge mode and we'll double click this edge. We're going to detach that. So hold down Shift and the right mouse button, detach components, and then let's go into face mode, double click this face here. That'll select that section and we can delete it. And we'll do the same for the top. Let's go into edge mode. We'll double click this edge, hold down Shift and the right mouse button, and then we will detach those components as well. And then go into face mode, double click this face and delete it. And then what we'll do is we'll go back to our perspective view and let's extrude that edge down. So we'll go into, select the mesh, we will isolate it. And over here, we'll go into edge mode, select this edge, hold down Shift, double click this one, and then go into your move tool, hold down Shift, extrude it down, and that should be far enough for that section, and we'll do the same in the other area as well. So let's go into edge mode, we'll select one of these edges, and then hold down Shift, double click maybe this one. We actually will add this edge to it as well. And then same thing, go into your move tool, hold down Shift, do a smart extrude down to about there is probably fine. And now let's go into object mode, select our mesh, and we'll exit isolation view, and let's have a look. And there we go, we have some terrain and a river in this channel. This water's staying a little bit high, but easy enough to fix. We'll just select the mesh, go to the Deform tab, choose this. And there we go, we have a river sitting in a little bit of terrain. Alright, that wraps up another one. Hopefully you enjoyed today's tutorial, and you can use the techniques to make great looking low poly terrain and rivers. Until next time, this has been Digital Dreambox, your destination for game art.